Welcome to the Saturday Cadence Podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence Podcast is the heartbeat of college football. Rivalry week is complete, and it was filled with one of the biggest upsets, not only in rivalry history, but college football history, as Michigan took down Ohio State. So it's time to make sense of what happened in the game for the Buckeyes, where the disconnects were with the coaching staff, and just do a full-on reaction to what we saw live in Columbus. I was there. I was in the stadium. Now, there's other notable rivalry week games. We'll get to those. The college football playoff picture looks vastly different now. Other teams with an opportunity for a bye. But this Ohio State-Michigan game, we're going to zero in on this one and see what exactly happened. So welcome into Saturday Cadence. My name is Blake Biscardi. And you know, we're looking at this game. I'm sitting there in the stadium in the pregame. You could see that there was a difference in energy. There was a difference in the coaching staff. There was an edge to this Ohio State team. And it's not that Michigan came in there and thought, oh, we were going to get rolled or anything. No, this is a rivalry game. Michigan has controlled the series for the last 3 years. They came in there. I mean, they were confident. They weren't scared of the moment. They weren't scared of the Buckeyes. They knew their game plan and what they had to do to win. And if you read any of my articles or listen to any of my pregame podcast or thoughts on this game, I said that there was only one version that Michigan could win. There was one version of this game that they could win. And this, if it was going to be a Michigan win, they would have to lull Ohio State into a trap and play this game on their terms where it's ugly. They get turnovers. They run the football. They play opportunistic defense, which again, that factors into getting turnovers, and they have to trick Ohio State into toughness equating to running the football. Okay. So I wrote this article on Sunday morning. It came out tsilverbulletin.com if you want to check it out. I'm going to read this to you. Okay. So winning the rushing battle has become Ohio State's latest obsession, as the Buckeyes have failed to accomplish in each of the last 4 meetings against Michigan. And while it's true that the team that runs for more yards historically wins the game, it's become a skewed statistic. There was one version of the game Michigan needed for a victory, and it involved sucking Ohio State into a trap of toughness equating to running the football, which is precisely the version that played out on Saturday in Columbus. Toughness is not defined by mind-numbingly forcing the ground game up the middle against an NFL-caliber interior and running to the short side boundary without numbers. Toughness is playing your game on your terms by imposing your will on your opponent when they know it's coming and still cannot stop it. All right, I'm going to stop the article there. That paragraph about toughness and game planning, that's where the failure was for Ohio State. I was there live. I was there in the pregame. I saw warm-ups. That team had juice. They had energy. Now, they have a monkey on their back too, so I don't want to go without that. Everything was there. It was a coaching failure. And now I'm not just going to sit here and harp on Ryan Day for the duration of this show. That's not what I'm trying to do. It was the players were not in advantageous positions to succeed. How Ohio State did not attack the Michigan secondary was beyond me. There were 2 drives that stick out to you for Ohio State in the game offensively that were good. It was the first drive. They go right down the field. Now they end up stalling and getting a field goal. Okay. But then the other one right before the half where they used tempo, they threw the ball, and they find Jeremiah Smith in the corner of the end zone. I said, okay, you know what? We had an ugly first half. Reminded me of the Penn State-Ohio State game a couple of weeks ago. Ohio State will turn it on. They have now found what they need to do on offense, and they'll be okay in the second half. Well, that wasn't the case. They just got dragged out into more quicksand. They got deeper and deeper in that quicksand. They could not get out of it. And now you're in a game of, all right, well, we're playing this game on their terms. Can we beat them at it? You know how many times Michigan's punted in the fourth quarter against Ohio State in the last 4 years on this win streak? If you said 0, you were correct. They have not punted since 2019 in the fourth quarter of this rivalry game. Now, I think I'm going to start with this defense. I think the Ohio State defense actually played really well. Caleb Downs and Jack Sawyer, those interceptions that they had, unbelievable. That Jack Sawyer play was supposed to get a statue of him outside of Pickerington. That was going to be his play, one we would remember forever. But the plays that ensued from that on offense, I'll never understand. Ohio State's inside the 20 now in this other situation. You run a draw on 3rd and 10. Are you kidding me? With the best receivers when you can't run the football all day? The only matchup advantage Michigan had in this game was on the defensive line, specifically the interior. Ohio State had 15 running plays of 2 yards or less. 15. They only had two that went for more than 10 yards. That was never the matchup that Ohio State was going to win in this game. And now, listen, if Seth McLaughlin played or if Josh Simmons played, I think this looks different. I think Ohio State wins the game. And I'm not going to sit here and say, well, they lost because they didn't have two linemen. No, Ohio State had paths to victory. They had multiple without those two linemen. And they chose to run into the teeth of that defense. That is an NFL defensive line. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant had two of the best games of their career. They were almost unblockable at times. When I'm watching these two guys play, it's not foreign. You're not running the football, and no team is running the football efficiently and effectively on Michigan. No one's going to do it. Will Johnson's not playing. You have Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate. You have them out wide. Use them. Throw the ball down the field. They didn't really take any deep shots in the game. Now, it was a little bit windy. What was that? Will Howard took a massive hit in the first half. Whether or not he had a concussion, we don't know. Something just seemed off. The game plan from Chip Kelly, I thought, was his worst of the season. That was completely abysmal. I don't know why. I mean, you even heard one of the Michigan coaching staff members say we were shocked. They didn't try to expose us. They didn't try to target our guys outside. They didn't try to take advantage that they had athletically and schematically in space. They didn't do it. And now you're sitting there, it's 13-10, and you lost 4 in a row. Okay. There's two ways that you can look at this. Now, Buckeye Nation was, I would say, skeptical maybe of Ryan Day. Now, this is not everybody. But now after Saturday, there's like, all right, get him out. He's done. He can't do it. He can't win this game. He doesn't coach his best in the big games. You keep looking at these things. Well, let's back up a second. Special teams in this game, we're going to talk about Ryan Day. We're going to talk about Chip Kelly. We're going to talk about this game plan. We're going to talk about everything. It cannot be overstated how important these special teams plays were in this game. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. Ohio State missed 2 field goals. They lost by 3. You just have to make one more of those, and that game ends up in overtime. And now you're looking at which offense is better. I'm going to take the Buckeyes despite the day they were having. Okay. Kick return right out of the half. Ohio State muffs the kick return. Well, actually, you know what? It bounced. Then it gets recovered. Run it out. Bad starting field position. Then Caleb Downs is back there on a punt in the second half. It bounces. It was windy. Didn't field it properly. There wasn't a fumble. He just let it bounce and roll. It was a 68-yard punt for Michigan. Totally flipped the field. Ohio State was supposed to get good starting field position somewhere on between the 25 and 35 on their side of the field. That's good starting field position, especially as the game was going. But no. So you take a look at the kick return, bad starting field position. You take a look at that punt, bad starting field position. The 2 missed field goals. I mean, there's been so much talk about Parker Fleming over the last 2 years at Ohio State. Well, he's gone, and that was an absolute disaster of special teams. And that's what I think is not going to get enough credit. We're going to look and say, well, Will Howard didn't do this, or Ohio State couldn't run the football. The offensive line played well. What were they doing? Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, blah, 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 blah. The special teams I actually think was more of a factor than those things because they're hidden yards in the game. Those are the yards that make the difference. Jim Tressel used to say all the time that the punt was the most important play in football. And you know what? That 68-yard punt that Michigan had may have been the difference in the game. It may have been the difference in the game. So when you're looking at this matchup and what you had stylistically, all that stuff, I mean, it was right there for the taking for Ohio State, and they did not do it. So now you look toward the future. Ross Bjork, he did come out and say that Ryan Day is our guy. He is our coach. We believe in him. We will evaluate what happened in the rivalry game. There will be a place for that, but we've got to keep our eyes focused on the college football playoff right now. And I do agree with him saying that. And it is difficult with the transfer portal window opening. You have the early signing day, you have postseason games right now. I mean, it is really challenging for programs, especially if they're going to make a coaching move to do so in this climate. And I'm not suggesting that Ryan Day should be fired, but there's a lot of Buckeye Nation that says, I don't know if he could do it. I don't know if he's the guy. Give us Mike Vrabel. Well, this could be the conundrum for Ohio State. Let's say Ryan Day is not the guy, and Vrabel, he doesn't have a job right now. One of his goals is to become the head coach of Ohio State, but he's going to have an NFL opportunity. If he entertains one, can you then lure him away? If you give Ryan Day one more year and you have the same results next year, maybe you're 9-3, whatever it is, you're just not meeting the expectations. I know the schedule's a bit difficult. Is this the window for Vrabel? Do you make the quick move off a day? I don't think you do. I don't. I think the infrastructure is there. There's some things to figure out, but Ohio State has to stop approaching this game where toughness is running the football, because your program identity is not running the football in that power set. You're just not going to come up and line up and power run the football. You have skill guys. You have great running backs. You have a good offensive line, but you got to beef up that offensive line, because Ohio State with Urban Meyer was a power spread team. Those teams were fine. Days made it more pro style. And I think if you want to win a national championship game, you have to have the style of offense that Ohio State has, because Ohio State can run the football. Now, I don't know if they will in the college football playoff. It might look like the Michigan game or the Indiana game, because you're down Seth McLaughlin and Josh Simmons, so you're not going to be able to run it as efficiently. You still should be able to run the football. You're Ohio State. But just stylistically, that is the offense that can win it. I mean, Michigan did it last year. It seemed like a bit of an outlier. We've not seen many teams do that, but Michigan also had an elite defense last year. So it's different. You can slow the game down when you're that efficient on offense and when your defense is that good. And you know what? Ohio State's defense is that good, but the offense let it down. That's the thing. Ohio State's giving up less than 11 points a game. It's 10.9. The last 5 teams to give up less than 11 points a game won the national championship. Can Ohio State do that? We'll see. And that would be the thing that maybe saves Ryan Day's job in some people's eyes. But there's going to be a lot of people that evaluate, because Ohio State now, with this 12-team playoff, they have an opportunity to play for a national championship now. They're in the college football playoff. It's just going to be a matter of seeding. Where are they going to play? Is it going to be home or is it going to be away? No Big Ten championship game now. So it's going to be interesting for Ohio State. Do they draw an SEC team? What happens? That first game is so important for this team and for Ryan Day and for the coaching staff. It is so, so important. And they're backed into a corner. We saw the backed into a corner in State College. I think that's the version that we see in the playoff. And this is the other point that I want to raise, and I might be in the minority in saying this. I actually think that performance that we saw from Ohio State on Saturday against Michigan, I think the only way that game happens is if you play Michigan. I don't think that game would happen against a Tennessee or a Georgia or an Oregon or a Notre Dame. I don't. I think that's the outlier performance. It's a mental thing for Ohio State, I think. It was like the Raptors when they play LeBron in the playoffs. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. You can't get over that corner. You can't get over that hump. But I truly do expect a different Ohio State team in the college football playoff. I don't think you're going to see anything close to the disconnect on offense that you saw there. I think they're going to take the shots. I think they're going to run the more normal offense. They won't get lulled into that game. They got to play it on their terms. So I think that was the outlier game. And it's just unfortunate for Ohio State that it happened against Michigan in that game as 3 touchdown favorites where you had to win. Most lopsided loss in rivalry history in terms of spread. Now, the only other thing you can think of is 1969 with Woody Hayes, lost 24-12. Upset of the century. I think that this one's bigger. So maybe Ryan Day will make a rug and put it in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center like Coach Hayes did. But we'll see, because they have got to figure out this Michigan problem. They have got to figure it out. So those are my thoughts on that game right now. I think it's going to be a very, very interesting and loud and uncomfortable and warm offseason for Ohio State. But if we look elsewhere in the country, South Carolina beat Clemson. Okay. This playoff picture is going to get super interesting. The rankings are going to come out, and the only teams that have something left to say are the ones in conference championship games. Okay. So where South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Miami are ranked, will tell you who's in line to make the playoff should an upset happen on Saturday. Personally, of those teams, I think South Carolina is playing the best football. But I also know that we had a game between South Carolina and Alabama won that game. That head-to-head has to matter. That's why we play the games. I don't think South Carolina is unequivocally better than Alabama, which is in the committee's lexicon for differentiating between teams when they want to do something like that with precedent. I don't think they're unequivocally better. I do think they're the better team, but I think Alabama, because they beat them, should get the nod over South Carolina. And I think that is what will happen. So I think you should expect to see Alabama in as the final team in that playoff. Now, depending where Arizona State is ranked, should they win the Big 12, that could mean Alabama either gets the 11, potentially 12 seed. I don't see a world that they can get all the way up to the 10, but we'll see what happens there, because Penn State's now in the Big Ten championship game. And this is what I want to talk about here. I think Ohio State should still have a home playoff game, and this is where it gets interesting, because Penn State and Oregon now play. They're both in the top three. It would have been similar to Ohio State and Oregon too. Okay. If Ohio State lost, though, I thought Ohio State would still be the 5 seed. If Penn State loses, they're 10-2, and Ohio State is 10-2, and Ohio State has the comparable record. Now they also have the head-to-head win. I can't sit here and argue for Alabama over South Carolina and not argue for Ohio State over Penn State. So I think Penn State would fall beneath Ohio State in the rankings with a loss to Oregon. And it's a common opponent. Ohio State lost by 1. If Penn State loses by more than 1, I mean, we'll see, because there's also that school of thought where should you be penalized for playing in a conference championship game? I don't think you should fall out of the playoff, but I do think that your seeding could be adjusted because of it. So I will take Oregon to win the Big Ten championship game. They'll get the number 1 seed. Then you have Texas and Georgia. If Texas wins, Ohio State is now locked into a home game, and so is Penn State. Georgia with 3 losses will become interesting. Do they get a home playoff game, or do they fall? I think that they would fall beneath Tennessee despite the win, because they have 1 more loss than the Volunteers, and then maybe Tennessee slides up and gets a home game. I think it's a foregone conclusion that Notre Dame is getting a home game. I actually think that if Texas and Oregon win, that Notre Dame is the 5 seed. I actually think that is what would happen. Notre Dame would get the 5 seed, and then you would have Penn State, Ohio State, and Tennessee. What order we will see. Those would be the next 3 teams I think that would host games. And then you would have Georgia. You would have probably SMU if Clemson wins. If Clemson loses, then the door opens to maybe Miami or a second SEC team. So we'll see how that goes, because that bottom of the field, we're arguing for a lot of flawed teams. There's a lot of flawed teams in college football. But I think if we have SMU win, let's just assume the favorites win. So then you're looking at Oregon winning, Texas winning, SMU winning, and I believe Arizona State is favored. They are favored, yes. So favorites win. Does Boise win? And does Boise get that bye over Arizona State? That's what it looks like. So I am very intrigued at what the committee does in these rankings. Because if you're looking at the 8 people, you're sitting there with Indiana at 9, Boise at 10, Bama 11, Arizona State 12. Now, just because you're ranked in the top 12 doesn't mean that you're in the playoff. But because all of the playoff teams are ranked inside the top 12, no team has to now jump up into the rankings like Arizona State had to do previously. Those will be your playoff teams. You'll just get reseeded based on format. So then you would have Oregon and Texas with a bye. You would have SMU with a bye, Boise State with a bye, which would leave Notre Dame at the 5, Ohio State at the 6, Penn State 7, Tennessee 8. Those teams would host Indiana, Alabama, Arizona State, and who? That'll be the debate. Very curious to see what the committee does. Excuse me. As you can tell, my voice is going a little bit. Did not have it much of last week. So I'm going to end the show a little bit early. We'll come back to you on Thursday with more college football playoff rankings thoughts, break down conference championship games, make some official picks, and give you our final playoff field projections. So I appreciate you turning into the show today. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on social media at Saturday Cadence for more content throughout the week, or me personally at Blake Biscardi. And remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. I am Blake Biscardi. We'll see you next time. God bless.